2 years, 4 months, and 11 days since I walked out of that hospital, with nothing but a cardboard box of personal items, and the quiet devastation of knowing I'd never go back. I'd counted the days at first, crossing them off on a gas station calendar I'd bought on the drive from Chicago to my sister's apartment in Columbus, Ohio. Then I stopped counting. Then I stopped thinking about it. Or I tried to, anyway. That's the thing about trying not to think about something. You end up thinking about it constantly. His name was Fletcher. Fletcher Hale. And when I say that name now, I feel the way you feel when you press your tongue against a bruise. Familiar, dull, faintly alarming. We'd met during my residency at Northwestern Memorial. He was 41, I was 28. He ran Hale Capital, which meant nothing to me at the time, because I'd spent the last 6 years of my life studying pathology reports and pulling double shifts and surviving on vending machine coffee. Rich men were background noise to me. I barely noticed them. He noticed me. He was there visiting a board member who'd had a cardiac event, and I happened to be the one who walked into the wrong room at the wrong time. He was sitting in a chair next to the bed, jacket folded over his arm, and he looked at me the way people look at something they've decided they want before they've even processed what it is. "You have the wrong chart," I said. "I know," he said. That was it. That was the whole thing. I should have walked out and never thought about it again. I didn't. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. We were married for 2 years and 3 months before I filed. And I left for reasons that are hard to compress into a single clean sentence, which is probably why people stopped asking after a while. The short version, Fletcher Hale, was a man who believed that love was a category of ownership, and I was 31 years old and finally old enough to know that I didn't want to be owned. What I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not my mother, not the therapist I started seeing after I moved to Columbus, was that I was 11 weeks pregnant when I filed. I found out the morning I'd already made my decision. The timing felt like a cruel joke, and for about 48 hours I sat with it alone in my car in a parking garage downtown and cried until there was nothing left. Then I made a different kind of decision, the kind you make when you realize the only person who can protect this child is you. I moved to Columbus. I finished my residency remotely, then took a position at Ohio Health Riverside Methodist. I had my daughter in February, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her father's exact jaw, which I chose to view as neutral rather than devastating. I named her Willa, not after anyone, just because it felt like her. Willa was 20 months old when my phone rang on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the break room at the hospital, standing at the coffee machine, halfway through a shift that had already been 6 hours longer than it was supposed to be. The number wasn't saved, but the area code was Chicago. I stared at it for a moment. Then I picked up. "Is this Dr. Whitfield?" "This is she." A pause. The kind that means whoever is on the other end is choosing their words carefully. "My name is Howard Bright. I'm the general counsel for Hale Capital. I'm calling on behalf of Fletcher Hale." My hand tightened around the phone. "He's asked me to reach out to you," the man continued, "because he's become aware that there may be a child. His child. And he'd like to—" "Where did he hear that?" Another pause. "Longer. He received some information recently." I set down my coffee cup. I walked out of the break room, down the hall, into the stairwell where no one could see me. "What kind of information?" "I'm not at liberty to." "Mr. Bright." My voice came out steadier than I felt. That was the residency. You learn to sound calm in situations where calm is not what you're feeling at all. "I want you to be very clear with me about what's happening right now." He was quiet for a moment. Then, he saw a photograph, on a mutual friend's social media, of you and a child who looks very much like him. He did the math. I closed my eyes. This is the part where I should explain that I wasn't hiding from Fletcher out of cruelty. Or at least, it wasn't only that. It was fear, mostly. Fletcher Hale was a man with resources I couldn't compete with, connections that went places I couldn't follow, and a temper that ran cold rather than hot, which is somehow worse. I'd watched him dismantle 2 business partners who crossed him. Not violently, methodically. I was afraid that if he knew about Willa, he would find a way to take her. Not because he wanted her, necessarily, but because she was his, and Fletcher Hale did not relinquish things that were his. But I also knew. standing in that stairwell, pressing my back against the cold concrete wall, that this moment had always been coming, that I'd been living on borrowed time. Tell him, I said, that if he wants to talk, he can talk to me directly, not through a lawyer. He anticipated you might say that. A brief silence. He'll call you at 7 tonight. I spent the rest of my shift functioning on autopilot. I checked labs, I reviewed charts, I spoke to patients and their families, and I nodded at the right moments and said the right words, and inside I was absolutely somewhere else entirely. My sister, Pamela, picked up Willa from daycare that evening. I didn't tell her why I needed her to stay late. I just said I had a work thing. Pamela is 4 years older than me and has always had the gift of knowing when not to push, which is the thing I love most about her. I was sitting at my kitchen table at 6:58 when the phone rang. I picked up on the second ring. Eleanor. Just my name. 2 syllables. And something I'd spent 2 years building collapsed a little bit, because it turns out you can make a whole new life for yourself, and your body still remembers things your brain has tried to delete. Fletcher? Is it true? I had prepared for this. I had run through approximately 30 versions of this conversation in my head during the drive home. I had decided I would be composed. Direct. Unbothered. Yes, I said. The silence that followed was so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. How old? He said finally. Not even a question. Just words, landing like stones. 20 months. Another silence. Her name? I hesitated. I don't know why. He was going to find out anyway. Willa. Something shifted in the quality of the quiet on his end. I couldn't name what it was. I'd spent 3 years learning to read Fletcher Hale, and I still couldn't always tell what was happening behind his eyes. I want to see her, he said. I know. Eleanor. I know, Fletcher. I heard you. I pressed my fingertips against the table. I need you to understand something first. She is 20 months old. She doesn't know you exist. Whatever this conversation turns into, however this goes, she doesn't get caught in it. She doesn't get used as leverage. She doesn't get lawyers and court orders thrown at her before she's even learned to use a spoon properly. Do you understand me? He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm not going to do that. You have to promise me. I promise you. And here's the thing about Fletcher Hale that I've never been able to fully explain to anyone who didn't know him. He was not a good man in the ways that matter most. He was controlling. He was emotionally withholding. He was so accustomed to having power that he'd stopped noticing when he was using it. But he also, genuinely, did not lie. It was almost a compulsion in the opposite direction, a rigid, almost pathological commitment to saying exactly what he meant. It was one of the things that had made me fall in love with him, and also one of the things that had broken me. I believed him. Okay, I said. I want to come to Columbus. I know. This weekend. I exhaled. Yes, okay. That's fine. I sat at the table for a long time after we hung up. Then I went to the room where Willa was sleeping, and I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. She was sprawled on her back the way she always was, arms thrown out like she was falling from something. Her hair was dark and curling at her temples. Her eyelashes made half-moon shadows on her cheeks. I thought, whatever happens, she's already the best thing. I thought, I'm sorry I didn't tell him. I thought, I'm not sorry, I left. All 3 things at the same time, which is how most true things tend to exist. He drove down Saturday morning. I'd told him the address of the park near my apartment, a neutral location which he accepted without argument. I arrived first, which I'd planned. I wanted to already be there when he pulled up. I wanted that small advantage of not having to watch him arrive. I was sitting on a bench with Willa on the grass in front of me, chasing a leaf the wind kept moving, when I heard the door of a car close behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I gave myself 3 seconds. Then I looked. He was wearing a gray jacket and dark jeans, and he looked exactly like himself, which was both obvious and somehow shocking. I don't know what I'd expected. 2 years is long enough to half convince yourself someone has changed shape in your memory, grown bigger or smaller than they actually were. He was the same. He stopped about 10 feet away. His eyes went to Willa first. She was wearing her little orange jacket, and she was completely unaware of him, utterly absorbed in her project with the leaf. She grabbed it. It fluttered away. She grabbed it again. She made a small triumphant sound that she always made when she caught things. I watched him watch her. His expression was, I don't have a good word for it. I've tried to find one since. It was the face of a man who has just understood something that fundamentally changes the shape of what he thought he knew. Something cracking open and something else, quiet and enormous, stepping in to fill the space. Willa finally noticed him the way toddlers notice strangers. Direct, unself-conscious, slightly suspicious. She stared at him for a long moment with her whole solemn face. Then she held the leaf out toward him, offering it. This leaf she'd worked so hard to catch. He crouched down to her level. He was a man who did not crouch. I had never in 3 years seen Fletcher Hale physically lower himself. He crouched, and he took the leaf from her very carefully, and he said, Thank you. Willa considered him. Then she turned around and went back to the business of living her life. I exhaled. He stood. He walked over and sat on the bench, leaving a careful distance between us, which I noticed. She looks like my mother, he said. I know. I've seen the photo in your office. Nodded slowly. He was still watching Willa. You could have told me. I know. Eleanor. I know, Fletcher. I turned to look at him directly. I was afraid. I know that doesn't make it right. But I need you to understand the kind of afraid I mean. It wasn't. It wasn't that I thought you'd hurt her. It was that I thought you'd fight me for her. And I didn't know if I could win. He turned to look at me. Something moved across his face. You thought I'd take her from you. I thought you had more resources than me and a better legal team, and a judge you probably played golf with. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. I wouldn't have done that. You also wouldn't have let me have full custody without a fight. He didn't deny that. He looked back at Willa. She's 20 months old, he said. Yes, and I've missed. He stopped. He pressed his jaw tight. 20 months, I said quietly. I know. We sat there for a while. Willa fell and got up and fell again and got up again, the way she always did, with absolutely no drama about it. She was that kind of kid. Undramatic about the falling, just accepted it as part of the process. I'd like to be in her life, he said. I know, I'm not trying to take anything. I want to be clear about that. He paused. I want to be her father. I don't know how to do that yet, but I want to try. I looked at him. I thought about the man I'd married and the man sitting next to me, and I tried to figure out if they were the same person, or if something had shifted in 2 years and 4 months, and I genuinely could not tell. Maybe that was okay. Maybe not knowing was the honest answer. That's Willa's decision, I said. Not mine, not yours. We both just show up, consistently, and we let her figure out what she wants from us. He nodded slowly, and Fletcher. I waited until he looked at me. If you decide this is too much, if you look at what this actually requires, the consistency, the showing up, the putting her first in ways that aren't convenient, and you decide you can't do it, I need you to tell me. Not disappear, not back away slowly. Tell me, so I can help her understand. I won't disappear. People say that. I don't say things I don't mean. You know that about me. I did know that about him. It was a complicated thing to know. Willa had made her way across the grass and was now standing at his feet, looking up at him with her arms, raised in the universal toddler signal for pick-me-up. He looked at her for a second like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. Then he looked at me. I nodded. He picked her up. His hands were large enough that they spanned most of her back. She settled against his shoulder with the complete and terrifying trust that toddlers extend to people who have done nothing to earn it, yet. And he stood there very carefully, like he was holding something that had never existed before. His eyes went bright. He pressed his mouth tight to stop whatever was happening to his face. Willa patted his cheek with her open palm. The way she always did with people she'd decided to accept. I had to look away. The next few months were not easy, and I want to be honest about that, because the version of this story that gets told usually skips this part. There was a custody agreement that required lawyers after all, which I'd known was inevitable. Fletcher's was better than mine. We negotiated. I lost some things I'd wanted, and kept other things that mattered more. We ended up with a schedule that gave him every other weekend and 1 weeknight, which was more access than I'd initially wanted and less than he'd initially asked for, and which was probably the appropriate outcome. There were phone calls that went sideways. There was one particular evening where he said something about my decision-making in the early weeks of the pregnancy that I found so breathtakingly arrogant that I had to set the phone face down on my couch for 5 minutes before I could respond without saying something I'd regret. There was also the time Willa said, Dada. The first time. For the first time during a video call with him, and we both went completely silent. And then I said I had to go check something on the stove, and I sat in my kitchen and let myself cry for a few minutes for all the things that were and weren't and might have been. And then I washed my face and came back, and we pretended neither of us had noticed. He started coming to Columbus more often than the agreement required. Not to push. He'd show up at the park near my building on a Saturday morning with coffee. Always the right order, which he'd remembered without being asked. And he'd sit with Willa in the sandbox and help her construct whatever city she was currently building. And sometimes I'd sit on the bench and watch them and feel something I couldn't quite name. Not regret, exactly. Not longing either. Something more complicated than both. One Saturday in November, gray sky, the trees stripped bare, Willa wrapped up in her puffy coat like a small, stubborn marshmallow. He sat down next to me on the bench while Willa was distracted by a squirrel doing something she found deeply important. I've been thinking, he said. Okay. About what you said, when I first called. About me not being the kind of man who could. He stopped, restarted. About consistency. I remember, I've been trying to understand what I got wrong. He was looking at his hands. Not with you specifically, although that too. But what I thought I understood about what it meant to take care of someone. I waited. I thought it was provision, he said. I thought if I gave people what they needed, materially, logistically, that was the thing, the primary thing. He paused. My father was the same way, very certain that love was a budget line. I glanced at him. I'm not offering that as an excuse, he said quickly. I know it isn't one. I'm just explaining where it came from. So you know I see it, the thing I got wrong. I see it now. Willa had abandoned the squirrel and was now marching back toward us with the purposefulness she applied to all physical movement. She walked like she had places to be. She's made me see a lot of things, he said quietly. She climbed up onto the bench between us, which she'd recently discovered she could do, and sat there with her feet dangling, very satisfied with herself. She looked at me, then at him, then at the trees, deeply content. He looked at me over her head. I'm not asking you for anything, he said. I want to be clear about that. Whatever you need from me, as her father, as someone who, he stopped, something passing over his face, I'll do it, whatever form that takes. I looked at him for a long moment, at the line of his jaw and the gray at his temples that had spread a little in 2 years, at the careful way he sat beside her, always angling slightly toward her, always just a little more alert when she was near. I don't know what I need yet, I said honestly. I'm still figuring that out. Okay, but I think, I stopped. Started again. I think Willa should know that her parents don't hate each other. I think that matters. Whatever else is true. It's true, he said. I don't hate you. I don't hate you either. Willa, apparently deciding this conversation had nothing to offer her, slid off the bench and went back to the grass. We both watched her go. Fletcher, yeah, I need more time, I know. Not more time deciding anything specific. Just time. To let things be what they are right now. Without pressure. Okay. Is that something you can do? He looked at me. For a second he looked like himself, the version of himself that I'd loved once, that I was still figuring out whether I could trust again. I've been learning patience, he said. Turns out children are very good teachers. That surprised a laugh out of me. A real one. He smiled. Just barely. The one that had always been quiet and genuine, and very different from the smile he put on for other people. I looked away before it did too much. The winter was gentle, mostly. We found a rhythm, the three of us, in the specific limited way that co-parenting requires you to find a rhythm. Not closeness exactly, but a kind of functional warmth, a willingness to be in the same space without armor. He came every other weekend. He called on Tuesdays. He learned which songs Willa wanted at bedtime, and which cup she refused to use, and exactly how she liked her eggs, which was scrambled with no pepper because she had opinions about pepper. He started staying a little longer each visit, not pushing into territory I hadn't offered, Just staying a little longer, helping clean up, standing in my kitchen doing dishes the way he'd never once done in the apartment on Lakeshore Drive, because there had always been someone else whose job it was to do things like that. One night in February, Willa's second birthday, he stayed for cake and bath time and the whole bedtime production. And afterward we sat on my couch while she slept, too tired to be formal. And I pulled my knees up under me and he sat with his elbows on his knees, and we watched something forgettable on TV, and it was fine. It was good. It was something I would have been afraid to call anything a year ago. I missed her birthday last year, he said quietly. I know. I missed it because I didn't know. He wasn't accusing, just saying it. I know. I want to not miss things anymore. He looked at me. I want to not miss things with her. And he stopped. A careful pause. I want to not miss things with you, if that's something that's possible. Eventually, I looked at him for a long moment. Here's what I knew. I knew that I had left for real reasons, and that those reasons had been serious, and that the damage had been real. I knew that change was possible but not guaranteed, and that wanting to be different and being different were not the same thing, and that I was a grown woman who knew better than to make decisions about her own heart based on hope alone. I also knew that he'd shown up, every weekend, every Tuesday, every Squirrel and Sandbox City and bedtime song. I knew that people who were performing showed cracks eventually, and the only crack I'd seen in Fletcher over the past 8 months was the one Willa had made when she first held out that leaf, and it wasn't a crack so much as an opening. I don't know yet, I said. That's okay. I might not know for a while. I know, and if I decide no, then we're Willa's parents, he said. And that's enough. That's already something. I looked at him. You really mean that? I really mean that. And I thought about counting days on a gas station calendar, and a cardboard box, and a parking garage in downtown Chicago, and a February morning 7 pounds 2 ounces, and a full head of dark hair. I thought about all the ways I'd held this life together by myself, and how I wasn't alone in it anymore. Not entirely, even if I didn't yet know the shape of what that meant. Willa made a small sound in the other room. One of her dream sounds, content and soft. Something she did sometimes, like she was narrating her own sleep. We both went quiet and listened. She talks in her sleep, I said. I know. He was smiling. She gets that from you. I hadn't known he knew that about me. I felt something small and warm settle in my chest. I didn't say anything. But I didn't look away, either.